let's begin. Welcome everyone. My name is Mari Margil with the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on global developments on the rights of nature. Today we're focusing on international agreements as well as recent developments in Switzerland, focusing on establishing, advancing, moving forward the recognition of legal rights of the natural world, including ecosystems, species, nature on the whole. So we're going to be really talking about that in depth today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I just want to give you a little bit of background on who the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights is. We work, of course, on advancing democratic and environmental rights, including those legal rights of the natural world. And we work from local to national level in many countries, United States, and with our partners that we have today in Switzerland and Sweden, as well as Australia, Nepal, and India, and other countries. And we do that in partnership with tribal nations as well. We have lots of resources available about what are democratic rights, what are environmental rights, what are the rights of nature. You can find those on our website. We put the site right into the chat box. So feel free to check that out. We welcome that. We have past webinars as well available on demand, including our recent webinar with several leaders from tribal nations about their work to advance legal rights of the natural world into tribal law and governance. So we welcome you to check that out. It's just now available. You can also sign up for our newsletter, contact us. We'll put some links up into the chat. But we work in partnership with people in different parts of the world. And if you're interested in learning more about what that could look like, about advancing democratic rights, rights of nature, where you live, we look forward to talking with you and seeing how we might be able to partner together and help you to do that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We welcome you joining us at these and other kinds of events and being in conversation. So today, before we get started, we have a terrific set of speakers for you today. Just want to give you a little detail. This is obviously, we're on Zoom. Really appreciate everyone joining us in this format. We'll ask everyone to stay muted because we want to be able to hear our speakers, of course, and we're recording this, so we want to have really clear sound. So if you could stay muted, you're welcome to stay on video, of course. And also we have the chat box available. So please feel free to use that to make your comments or ask questions. We'll hear from our speakers today, and then we will have time for questions and answers and some discussion. So don't hesitate to send a question in the chat box, and we'll be looking at those during the course of this hour and be able to ask them of our presenters. So with that, thank you very, very much for joining us. Let's jump in to our webinar today. It's really a pleasure that we were able to have these two speakers join us today. We've partnered with them on advancing the rights of nature. We have our partners Doris Ragettli of Switzerland and Pella Thiel of Sweden. They're both working together to lead this effort to advance the legal rights of nature into the Convention on Biological Diversity. And as well, Doris has been working on the campaign to advance the rights of nature into Switzerland's constitution. So we'll first hear from Pella. Pella Thiel is a leading environmentalist in Sweden. She is the co-founder of several organizations, including Lodyn and Ecocide Sweden, and has been an advocate for the rights of nature there for a long time. In 2019, she was awarded the Environmentalist of the Year Award by WWF Sweden. So she really knows her stuff. We're really very lucky to hear from her today. And also we have her partner and our partner as well, Doris Ragettli of Switzerland. She's a co-founder of the organization Rights of Mother Earth, where she's leading the effort to gather signatures on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth, a big project that she's been leading for years. And in addition, Doris, as I mentioned, is working on a campaign to protect the rights of nature and enshrine it within Switzerland's constitution, which has really come to the fore, especially early this year. So we're going to be learning about that as well today. So together, as I mentioned, they're leading this effort to move the rights of nature into the Convention on Biological Diversity, a really, really important step as the convention is being reviewed and renewed over the next several years. And so first, we're going to start by hearing from Pella about what this is all about with the convention. What does it mean to bring the rights of nature in? And so first, everybody join me in welcoming Pella Thiel. Pella.
Thank you, Mari. It's great to be here, and I'm so, humble and proud to be here. It's been we have been working together for some years, and I'm so grateful for that because you and Thomas and Doris are so generous with your knowledge and your experience. And it's kind of, when working in this field, everyone, you get to work with your heroes, and that's great. That helps you take on some huge projects, and I think this is a fairly huge project. So I'm going to share my screen. So the Convention on Biodiversity is the framework where the states of the world, not including, I'm sad to say, the US, is one of the few states which aren't state parties to the CBD, as I will call it for short. But I think there's 197 states, so basically the rest of the world. And it was created in Rio back in '92 as a way for the world to come together to safeguard biodiversity. And as we all know, this hasn't been very successful. So in 2010, the decade 2011 to 2020 was named the UN Decade on Biodiversity to, yes, now we will really do it. We're going to save life on this planet. And what happened? Well, the convention is reviewing its work now and then. So last autumn came a report, the Global Biodiversity Outlook, where they tried to understand, so where are we in terms of biodiversity? And as you again all know, it's a massive failure. Even after a decade of biodiversity, the world has missed all of its targets. So we're setting nice targets and then we are reviewing them and we know that we are failing. And why is that? Well, it's because we have a society which is colonizing the world. And this was the report that really, moved me last year, where some scientists try to estimate the weight of the technosphere, so the materials that humans make, our buildings, our infrastructure, our stuff, things we make, and they concluded that the things that humans make now outweigh the entire biomass of the earth. Just the mass of the plastic of this planet is now greater than the weight of all animals. And this is kind of, I don't know, it's very difficult to take in. So, oops, sorry. So it's very interesting to me that more and more of the international frameworks, like the Convention on Biodiversity, are explicitly now calling for transformation. So the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is saying that it sets out an ambitious plan to implement broad-based action to bring about a transformation in society's relationship with biodiversity. And this framework has as its purpose to galvanize urgent and transformative action by governments and all of society. And this is really encouraging. As Mari said, right now the convention is renegotiating its framework to get a new action plan for the next decade. And this is the draft, the zero draft of that. And I'm going to get into it a bit more. But just this realization that in order to do what they say is bend the curve on biodiversity, we have to transform society. And that's very interesting because then you have to think about, so how do you do that? How does transformational change happen? How do we transform systems? And this is a model from Donella Meadows, which is a person I admire almost as much as Miss Margill. And she has thought a lot about systemic change, and this is her model. So at the top of the iceberg here you have events. So what's happening? Things that you can count, that you can measure. So how many species go extinct, or how many nature reserves do we create, and how many people choose to buy organic food, things like that. And that's where we tend to focus when we want to change society. That's where we focus, because that's what we can measure. That's what we can see. That's the visible part of the iceberg. But as you see this arrow here, it doesn't have a lot of leverage. So if you want to change the system, that's not where you can work. You don't have any power there. But you have to go below the surface to look at what trends are there over time, what patterns, what is the system moving towards. And even more when you go to the structure of the system. So this is where you find law, for example. What influences the patterns? What rules do we give ourselves in society? But most leverage for transformation is down, deep down, where you maybe can't even see what's happening, let alone measure it, where we have our views of the world, our values, our assumptions around who we are and what the world looks like, what's right and what's wrong, our beliefs. And this is really interesting when it comes to the theme we have today on rights of nature, because today we are living with an anthropocentric assumption of the world, that humans are the ones with rights and the rest of the world is basically stuff, resources that we can use. And that means that, there's no, when we think about development as something that humans do and create and then what we're going to do is to just do that, and there is nothing there to hold us back, because there's no one there. They're just objects, resources. So this is the key transformational change that the Convention on Biodiversity is seeking. But they don't know that really. So what we are trying to do is to tell them that we have to move from an anthropocentric system, which is even more. There's even a separation. It's not just that humans are or men are in the top of the hierarchy here, with women a bit below, close to the whales. It's that there is a total separation. We don't view the rest of the world as alive even. So the transformational shift is when we understand that we are a part of a living whole. We have rights, but so do all the others. So nature has the right to exist, and that is the basis of a partnership between humans and nature, and not just a system of dominance and control, which is what we have now. So the explicit goal of the Convention on Biodiversity is living in harmony with nature by 2050. And what we think is that there is no way we can live in harmony with nature if we don't have a relationship, and we can't have a relationship if we think of the world as a resource. So Doris and I, we were hanging around in Davos. I don't know what we were thinking when we were there, but here we are dressed up as activists together with an XR fellow. And we were, thinking about this opportunity that actually the Convention on Biodiversity is having a restructuring. And if we really think that rights of nature is the transformation we need now in this age of mass extinction and transition, then that's where we need to work. And it seemed like a daunting task. I mean, how do you do that when the actors are states? I don't know. It was just Doris and me, but we thought, okay, we will give it a try. And since we have been to Mari's school, we know that big things can be done by small people. So what did we do? We found out that actually it's possible to get the email addresses of all the focal points of all the states in the CBD. And so we prepared this nice little postcard, and we also prepared a written brief on rights of nature and how it relates to the goals and the purpose of CBD. And we asked nicely my daughter if she could get all those email addresses, because there are a lot of them, 1,700 actually. And so we have several times written to the focal points of the CBD, and we have had meetings with them, and we have also gathered a lot of organizations behind this cause, which you can find. I will put the link, or Doris or someone will put the link in the chat. And the nice thing is that this is actually a very accessible way of influencing a very powerful framework, because any of us can connect with the focal points of CBD in our countries or in other countries, and ask them and poke them and say, this is actually the change we need to see. And they might not know. In many cases they don't know. They are not aware of rights of nature, that it's happening in the world and that it's powerful. So this is also an educational task. To our huge surprise, in August last year came the updated zero draft of this framework in CBD, and it has the wording: consider and recognize where appropriate the rights of nature. This is not a very strong wording, but it's actually the first time in an international agreement, to my knowledge, that rights of nature is mentioned. So we were incredibly surprised and happy when we saw this, and we still don't know how it got there. It's a little mystery. But this is still a draft, and there are meetings going on in CBD actually as we speak now in May and June, and not until October will be the COP meeting in Kunming, China, where it will be finally adopted, this framework. So anything can happen to it. It can be taken out, it can be strengthened, we don't know. So we are still poking, and we are proposing that the wording could be strengthened to consider, recognize, and legally enforce the rights of nature. Was that it? Yes, it was. So we are really inviting you to be a part of this this thing, to help us, and you can read more, and you can also find the link to find the contacts to your focal points in on that website, and just please connect with us, because this is amazing actually, and shows that things can be done even on that global level. Thank you.
Okay, Pella, just before we move to Doris, I just want to ask, can you just explain, the focal point, is that essentially the lead negotiator for each country? Can you just clarify what that is?
Yeah, exactly. So a country like Sweden, where I'm from, and actually we should say something, it's a bit funny that we're from Sweden and Switzerland, and Sweden is the Nordic country, so close to Norway, while Switzerland is a country a bit to the south in the middle of Europe. And a country like Sweden has a host of focal points, so they might have 10 or 15. One is the lead, and then they have different areas of responsibility, while smaller or poorer countries might have one or two. Yeah. And there's something else I should say, actually, since we're talking about international agreements, that so we are working now towards the COP meeting, the central meeting point of the CBD, which is now in October in China. But it's also the case that the next high-level UN meeting on sustainability, which happens every decade, will be next year in June in probably both, actually, in Stockholm and Nairobi. And that's also an incredibly important meeting space for sustainability for the world's countries. So of course we should have rights of nature on the agenda there. So we're thinking about, this initiative can be further built on towards Stockholm plus 50, as we Swedes call it, since it's 50 years since the first the first sustainability conference on the international arena overall, which was in Stockholm in 72. And we have this it's the same issues that we're talking about still. It's just that everything is very much worse.
Okay, Pella, thank you for clarifying that and putting it into the larger idea of how this looks in the context of other international agreements, because they're all individual agreements, but they have influence and impact and have to work in context with one another. So that's very helpful. So thank you. Now we're going to hear from Doris. And Doris, as I mentioned earlier, is a co-founder of the organization Rights of Mother Earth, working on gathering signatures on the UN Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth and doing other kinds of outreach around rights of nature and rights of Mother Earth. And as well, as I mentioned, she is working on the campaign to bring the rights of nature into the Switzerland constitutional framework. So she's got a lot on her plate. So please join me in welcoming Doris Ragettli. Doris.
Hi, thank you, Mari, for this wonderful gathering and introduction. And thank you, Pella, for this great presentation. I just want to add perhaps to what Pella was finished, where Pella was leaving it off with the CBD. They are currently inviting people to send in phrases to make the CBD stronger for International Biodiversity Day, which is on the 22nd of May. And we have prepared a mailing also to the focal points, but also for non-governmental organizations and anyone who would really like to contribute to this. And I'm putting this phrase in the chat to make the CBD stronger. And there's a link to the Secretariat where you can send it to. Oops, I hope I got everything. Yes. And the little sentence in the parentheses is what we are asking them. Keeping rights of nature in the CBD will make the convention stronger in order to bend the curve of the loss of biodiversity and for a future in harmony with nature. So if you feel inspired to send that in tonight after the call, there's a link below. Let's see. Yeah. Great. Thanks. And then, as Mari mentioned, when I learned that human beings have rights and corporations have rights, but nature is treated as a commodity, that's what got me moving on starting the global petition, asking the UN to adopt a Declaration of Rights of Mother Earth, which you're also welcome to sign and share. I'm putting this link also in the chat. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, so we currently have almost 400,000 signatures. Some we collected by hands. We, believe it or not, we started in 2009 collecting signatures in schools, in Rio at the Earth Summit, where we delivered the first 117,000 signatures to Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General. So right now, when you sign the petition online, you'll see about almost 277,000 signatures, but we have a whole box full of lovely drawings from children, which really is close to my heart, and many signatures on paper. And as Mari mentioned, currently we have also in Switzerland a wonderful group who is organizing a World Ethic Forum, like the World Economic Forum happens in Davos every year. Leonard Bardil, a wonderful artist in Switzerland who is a children's song writer and singer. He's organizing this World Ethic Forum from the 1st to the 3rd of October. And at the core of that is how can we realize rights of nature? A part of the group who is organizing this are 5 parliamentarians from all different parties, believe it or not. And they filed a parliamentary initiative at the government to include rights of nature in the constitution and acknowledge rights of nature in law, which is unheard of really in Switzerland. So it made the news. It's a kind of a new thing for people, and it has been welcomed by the media very well. We are very pleased about that. And now this has opened doors for presentations at all kinds of levels, which will help to create awareness about this. And yeah, and then there is the organization IDEO in the French part of Switzerland, who have done a beautiful job for getting rights for the River Rhone. And they really want to do a big, lots of events around the river and what does it mean? What does water mean for us? How come water is used as a commodity when it's really the source of all life? And they want to involve children and civil society, and obviously then eventually also start a petition. That too, in their heart, will serve as a model, which can then be used for other rivers in the Italian part of Switzerland and in the German part of Switzerland, and which will then unite us. So we will have an international petition which reaches out to the UN, which is a global governing system that helps to nudge a society in a direction. And with that, we wish it to make a signal for a paradigm shift really at the global level, and then the national levels and grassroots levels. And for that, Mari, we really salute CELDEF and CDER for the pioneering work you have done with the local rights of nature ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you very much, and for the work that you've been doing. One of the questions, we're going to move folks now into questions and answers and from our presenters. And so one of the questions that just popped up, Doris, is for people who are in the area of Switzerland with the World Ethic Forum in October, is there a need for volunteers? Can people attend? How is it going to be?
Yeah,
run?
Sure.
Is it even going to be in person? I guess is a good question at this point.
That's still, we're still, we're going to have to finally decide. We're looking at a hybrid conference. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen physically with as much people as we are allowed to. And then have people speak via Zoom or any other teleconferencing way. Yes, volunteers are welcome. Yes, people can sign up.
Okay, and should they contact you or go to the website, the World Ethic Forum website?
Either is possible. It is.
Okay.
Got that right, yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, and then another question that's come in, and maybe this, Pella, is for you, which is, how do we get in touch regarding, particularly with the Convention on Biological Diversity, if people want to engage further in terms of helping to move this forward beyond the zero draft?
Yeah, they can get in touch with me. And when I comment, does it say my organization now and not my name for confusion?
No, it's saying your name.
Oh. Okay, good. So I'll just write my email address in the chat.
Okay, so folks, there will be. Okay, and let's see. We have some other questions here. One of the questions is, Doris, with regard to, can you just tell us in terms of the effort with the Swiss Constitution, an initiative was filed with the government, and can you tell us what the next step is? Do you know in terms of what will happen at the government or constitutional level?
Yes, it will go through the internal works of the government, which all the different departments, and which could take up to 4 or 5 years. And then they could actually adopt it or decide amongst them, the national representatives and the parliamentarians, to either say yes, or they could throw it out. And then we'd have to start an official initiative, which takes 100,000 signatures, and then present it again to the government. And then it would be put up for public vote, which in Switzerland is a great tool we have. We have direct voting. So the subjects are they come in an envelope to everybody's house, and every subject, and people can vote on it directly, which is great. But we, of course, hope that the government will choose it before we have to go through that process.
Right. So, okay. So that's similar actually to some of the work that we've been doing in the United States, in which people can directly draft a law, propose it, and then bring it to voters by collecting signatures and having people vote on it, hopefully for it. And then the question also has just come in from Juliet. How far, this is for you, Doris, how far is the Rhone River from actually getting rights? Is that at the beginning of the process, or is it further along in terms of drafting a law?
No, it's still very much in the beginning. And they're a wonderful group of people.
Great, thank you. Okay. Thomas, you have some questions for the group? Everyone, yes, let me first just introduce, this is Thomas Lindsay. He's a co-founder of the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. Thomas.
We had a couple questions coming via chat. One is about, it's a broad question about challenges. So it's been 13 years since Ecuador adopted rights of nature provisions in their national constitution. So Pella, you're up first. So challenges in talking to folks, like with the CBD focal point people, are you still finding that most people haven't heard of rights of nature? So you have to bring them all the way up to speed, or are you finding it's easier now than it was 10 years ago?
So it varies a lot since the field has moved so much so far. So for example, in people in Colombia, they really know what this is about, while other people, I mean, most of the people that we're getting in touch with, they have no idea at all. And that means that it has been a bit difficult to have this conversation with a group of focal points because they are in very different understanding of what can be done or what it even is. So something that we have been thinking about is, because of course you have to have a state or better several states pushing for this. And what we have been thinking now is that, you know, some countries will push for it, and we don't know really where the issue is in regards of CBD in countries like Colombia or Ecuador and Bolivia, where the field is alive, sort of. So what we are thinking about now is to see if we can, is it possible to make alliances of countries in, for example, in Latin America or in Africa, where this is not yet on the table at all, for these people, because they are people, you know, the negotiators are people, and they have to understand that this is something that can be spoken about, that can be pushed for, and then that there is that they have support from each other. So that's what we are focusing on now, and that's why it's also really welcome if you feel that you would want to connect with focal points in your country or in other countries, because that really, really matters. The knowledge is generally very low.
And Pella, a related question, local efforts to adopt rights of nature laws in Sweden. Are there any local efforts happening right now? What are the kind of hurdles or challenges to that work as well?
What are the challenges? So the challenges, I suppose, is that we don't have any legal framework where it could happen locally in Sweden. So it's more of building a culture around it and building awareness that this is something that you can speak about or even think. But often people have more tangible challenges when it comes to forests or lake, and it can feel very a bit fluffy to think about why you would push for the rights of a lake, for example, when it's not something that you can push for in the law because there isn't any legal constructions like that. So we have had great help from you to propose an amendment to the constitution in Sweden, and it has been a parliamentary motion for that, and it's still very early in the day. So that was an initiative from a few parliamentarians, but it has to go through the political system in Sweden, and we will just keep talking.
And Pella, before we get to Doris with some of these same questions, are you finding it easier to talk within country about rights of nature? Are you finding that there's a kind of learning curve that we've moved quicker on, since a lot of this stuff has become internationally more progressive?
Yeah, I mean, when I started thinking about this, it was in 2012, and I thought, wow, this is profound. This is something I have to work on, but how will I do that? And I can do it my whole life. I will never ever see anything changing. And boy, was I wrong. So it's changing so fast, and especially the examples from Ecuador that you have been working with has made a lot for us, for this to be even a thing that you can talk about. So it's totally different, the conversation that I can have in Sweden now compared to 2012 or 2017 when Mari was with us first time. It's really it's exciting.
Doris, a question to you about working at the international level on the CBD material. Have you found, what are some of the biggest challenges? Do you agree with Pella that it's kind of, you're running a class for people to bring them up to speed on rights of nature first before anything can happen?
Yes and no. I was surprised, well, yes, mostly yes, but I was surprised when I spoke with the Swiss national representative that he knew about rights of nature, and he's actually in favor, one of them, but there is a reluctancy to be the one to stick out his foot first or his heart for this first. And he was he was the only one I had that feedback from, how that he was in favor of it and he knew about it. But for the rest of it, it's like you said, a lot of education needs to be done, or awareness work about it. And then when we speak to children in schools, it's different. They are like, oh, you mean rights of nature doesn't exist? How come? It should. It's right there for most of the children. I haven't come across anyone of the younger citizens of this planet who didn't say, but of course, right away.
We had another question come in on chat. Doris, I'll ask you, do we know who actually put the language into the CBD on rights of nature?
We proposed it, but we really don't know who did it. We would love to know. So
there are no minutes or proceedings or anything to show who actually amended the CBD with that language into those provisions?
Must be, and we would actually love to find out. We've asked several people, and if anybody knows how to find that out, that would be great.
And Doris, can you just tell us, and just so that we're really clear in terms of the convention, in terms of the actual next steps that we might see, is there a draft that's going to be coming out before like October?
Pella, do you know exactly?
No, I don't. But there's a zero draft now, and it will probably, since they have a lot of meetings, I mean, this is on an incredibly detailed level, and we just don't have the time to follow all the negotiations. And but there will be an updated zero draft coming probably after summer towards the Kunming meeting.
Thank you.
And a final question from text for both of you. Somebody was asking, what's the ideal language that you want in the CBD? Obviously, what's in there now is awesome because it's a first recognition, but what's the ideal? What's the dream?
Doris is the dreamer among us, I think. But so what we have proposed is consider, recognize, or what did we propose? Consider, recognize, and legally enforce rights of nature. And I think, I mean, you, Thomas and Mari, you are really the experts. So if there's something that could be better phrased, that would be welcome. But also, we don't want to go too far, because what we really want is that it's there. So Doris, if you would dream, what would it say?
Yeah, as you just said, and of course our next step, the dream we have is that from this, focal points who have stood for or are standing for rights of nature will then work with us towards Stockholm Plus 50 and also support our call for the UN to adopt the Declaration of Rights of Mother Earth. That's my dream.
That's a good dream. And I think just sort of putting into context the work at the UN level, the work at the with the convention and other international agreements, you know, one of the things that I think is sort of important for us to understand how change occurs, which is, you know, like for instance, you know, when you have like the UN Declaration on the Right to Water, for instance, you know, part of the reason to do these international agreements, even if they're non-binding agreements, is to help influence, encourage, inspire change within the member states. So the different countries that are party to the agreement, and even if they're not a party to the agreement, to actually take those provisions, expand upon them, and build them into their own constitutional or legal frameworks and make them binding law within their own countries so that they're protecting biodiversity in a very strong way or protecting the right to water, whatever the focus may be. And so I think I just want to say as we're wrapping up here that the work that Pella and Doris are doing, I think is really quite important. You know, even if it's not the ideal language that you would want within the Convention on Biological Diversity, having it in there and being considered itself is a really important milestone in the kind of change, the kind of transformational change that you're advocating for, because it helps to elevate the dialogue. As you've said, you know, many of the focal points, the key people within the different countries that are working to negotiate the convention and the changes to the convention, they may just be hearing about rights of nature for the very first time. And what a great way for them to hear about it and to begin to learn about it. So I want to applaud both of you for the work that you're doing in your home countries, Sweden, Switzerland, but also in the international sphere within the UN, within the Convention on Biological Diversity and otherwise, because you're helping to move this dialogue forward, elevate this level of debate about we really need a transformational change in humankind's relationship with species, with the natural world in general. And this helps to move that debate along. It's very, very important, particularly from that standpoint, just to help people to understand that this even exists. You're shining a bright light on it. And I want to, you know, ask everyone to help celebrate the work that they're doing, because I think it's actually very, very important. Even if it's not the ideal language, it's very, very important. But I think we're going to move that ideal language forward. So with that, I want to thank both Pella, Thiel, Doris, Ragettli. Thank you both very, very much for joining us, because I think the work you're doing obviously is very important. You're both leaders, and I encourage people to follow up with them, follow their work. It's really quite important to advancing the rights of nature movement and the other work that they're doing. So thank you both very, very much.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, Mari. Thank you so much.
So we're coming to the close of this webinar, and I want to just encourage people to stay up to date on this work and other events. You can do that in part by signing up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. Twitter is just @RightsOfNature. And we welcome your support, of course, making a contribution so that we can bring these kinds of events and these kinds of speakers to you. We have different links and so forth in the chat box, so please follow them, and we'll follow up with you. Share this recording so that you can share it with other people. And again, if you're interested in learning about how to actually move this wherever it is you may live, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're just at info@centerforenvironmentalrights.org. And we encourage you to stay up to date and join us for future webinars and other kinds of events. So with that, we'll close. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mari and Thomas.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Pella.
Thank you, Tracy, who already emailed her focal points.
Awesome.